The rain-soaked parking lot, the flat tire, the black sedan that stopped when it shouldn't have. Elena Whitmore thought hitting rock bottom meant watching her ex-boyfriend mock her poverty in a grocery store. She was wrong. Rock bottom was the moment Lucien Moretti, East Coast Mafia boss, killer in a charcoal suit, looked at her tears and decided she belonged to him. One choice, one hand extended through a car window, and Elena's ordinary life shattered into something far more dangerous. Stay with me until the end. Hit like and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights in Save Mart buzzed like dying insects, casting everything in that particular shade of despair only discount grocery stores seem to master. Elena Whitmore stood in the cereal aisle counting coins in her palm, literally counting coins, like some Dickens character, while her phone buzzed with another overdue rent notification she couldn't afford to open. 26 years old, and this is what her life had become. She dropped a box of generic cornflakes into her basket, the kind that tasted like cardboard soaked in sugar water because the name brand stuff cost an extra $2 she didn't have. Her hand shook slightly as she moved through the aisles. Not from cold, from the particular exhaustion that came from working double shifts at a coffee shop that paid minimum wage, plus tips that barely covered bus fare. The thing about poverty wasn't that it was dramatic. It was that it was boring, soul-crushing in its mundane repetition. Wake up, go to work, smile at customers who didn't see you, come home to an apartment with heat that only worked half the time, eat ramen, sleep, repeat. Elena had stopped dreaming months ago. Dreams required energy she no longer possessed. She turned the corner into the produce section and her entire body went rigid. Grayson Vale stood 20 feet away, all 6'2" of polished perfection, wearing a cashmere coat that probably cost more than Elena's entire yearly income. His arm wrapped around a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a yacht club catalog, blonde, elegant, dripping in diamonds that caught the terrible fluorescent light and somehow made it look intentional. Elena's stomach dropped so fast she thought she might vomit right there on the linoleum. She tried to turn around, tried to disappear back into the cereal aisle before he noticed her. Too late. Elena? Grayson's voice carried across the produce section with that particular tone of delighted surprise that meant he absolutely wasn't surprised at all. Elena Whitmore? Is that really you? Every instinct screamed at her to run. Instead, she turned slowly, forcing something resembling a smile onto her face. Grayson, hi. He crossed the distance between them with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no in his entire privileged life, dragging his fiancée along like a trophy. He couldn't wait to show off. God, it's been what, 6 months? Grayson's eyes traveled over Elena's appearance with the kind of assessment that made her skin crawl, taking in her thrift store jeans, her worn sneakers, the clearance rack jacket with a small tear in the sleeve she'd tried to hide with a safety pin. You look exactly the same. The way he said it made it clear that wasn't a compliment. Elena's fingers tightened around her basket handle. Yeah, some things don't change, and some things do. Grayson pulled the blonde woman closer, his smile sharpening into something cruel. Elena, this is Victoria Ashford, my fiancée. Victoria, this is Elena. We dated for a while a few years back. 3 years. They dated for 3 years. But sure, a while worked too. Victoria extended a perfectly manicured hand, her smile the kind of polite vacancy that rich people perfected early. So nice to meet you. Grayson's told me absolutely nothing about you. Of course he hadn't. Elena shook her hand briefly, feeling the calluses on her own palm, from carrying coffee pots and scrubbing counters and doing all the unglamorous work that kept her barely afloat. Catch against Victoria's soft skin. Congratulations on the engagement, Elena managed, her voice sounding hollow even to her own ears. Thanks, Victoria beamed, holding up her left hand to show off a diamond so large it looked almost obscene. We're having the party next weekend. Grayson insisted on the Rosewood Hotel ballroom. It's going to be absolutely magical. 500 guests, Grayson added, his eyes still fixed on Elena with something that might have been pity if it weren't so clearly satisfaction. Catered by that French place downtown. You know, the one we could never afford when we were together. There it was. The knife, slipped right between the ribs. Elena's smile felt like it might crack her face in half. Sounds amazing. You know what? Grayson's expression shifted into something that made Elena's stomach turn. You should come to the engagement party. I mean it. We'd love to have you there. Grayson, Victoria started, her polite mask slipping slightly. No, really. He talked over his fiancée like she hadn't spoken at all, his attention laser-focused on Elena with the intensity of a man who'd found a new game to play. It would be great to catch up, see what you've been up to. I'm sure you have so much to tell us about your life. The way he said your life made it sound like a joke. Elena felt something crack inside her chest, some last fragile piece of dignity or self-respect, or maybe just the pretense that she was fine, that the breakup hadn't destroyed her, that watching him move on to someone richer and prettier and more suitable hadn't gutted her completely. That's really kind, she heard herself say, but I'm actually pretty busy and… With what? Grayson's smile widened. Elena, come on, don't be like that. What could you possibly be too busy for? Your coffee shop job. I'm sure they can spare you for one evening. Victoria shifted uncomfortably, clearly sensing that this had stopped being polite small talk and started being something uglier. But Grayson wasn't finished. He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to that intimate register that used to make Elena's heart race and now just made her feel sick. You know what I think? I think you're embarrassed. I think you're standing here in your discount grocery store counting coins for generic cereal, and you're embarrassed that your life turned out exactly like I said it would. Elena couldn't breathe. You remember, don't you? Grayson continued, his tone almost gentle now, which somehow made it worse. When you told me you wanted to be a writer, and I told you that was a fantasy for rich people who could afford to fail? Looks like I was right. Something hot and sharp burned behind Elena's eyes. She would not cry. She absolutely would not give him the satisfaction of crying. The party's next Saturday, Grayson said, straightening up, his moment of cruelty apparently satisfied. 7 p.m., Rosewood Hotel. You should definitely come. I really want you to see what success actually looks like. He steered Victoria away, leaving Elena standing alone in the produce section with her basket of discount groceries and her dignity in tatters. She made it to the checkout. Made it through pain with crumpled bills and loose change while the cashier watched with thinly veiled judgment. Made it to the parking lot before the tears started. The rain had begun while she was inside. That cold, miserable November rain that soaked through cheap jackets and turned the world gray. Elena fumbled with her keys, her vision blurred, her hand shaking so hard she could barely get the key in the lock. Then she noticed the tire. Front passenger side. Completely flat. Of course. Of fucking course. Elena stood there in the rain, staring at the flat tire on her 15-year-old sedan that barely ran on good days, and something inside her just broke. She'd held it together through the breakup, through losing the apartment they'd shared, through watching Grayson's social media fill up with pictures of Victoria. Beautiful, wealthy Victoria, who probably never had to count coins for cereal in her entire life. But this? Standing in a grocery store parking lot in the rain with a flat tire and 2 bags of discount food, and the echo of Grayson's voice telling her she'd failed at everything she'd ever wanted? Elena sank down against the car door and put her face in her hands. She didn't hear the car pull up, didn't register anything until a voice, deep, controlled, with an accent she couldn't quite place, spoke from somewhere above her. You're bleeding. Elena's head snapped up. A man stood 3 feet away, and her first coherent thought was that he didn't belong here. Not in this parking lot, not in this neighborhood, not in any world where people like Elena existed. He was tall, well over 6 feet, wearing a charcoal suit that fit him like it had been made specifically for his body, which it probably had been. Dark hair swept back from a face that was handsome in a way that made you think of old movies and dangerous men. Sharp jawline, high cheekbones, eyes so dark they looked black in the dim parking lot light, and he was looking at her like she was a puzzle he intended to solve. I'm fine, Elena managed, her voice coming out rough. She wiped at her eyes and realized he was right. There was blood on her palm. She must have cut it on something. She didn't even remember when. You're not fine. He said it like he was stating a fact, not making an observation. You're sitting in the rain, you're hurt, and you're crying. Really great detective work. Elena pushed herself to her feet, swaying slightly. Thanks for the assessment. I'll be… The parking lot tilted sideways. Elena didn't realize she was falling until strong hands caught her arms, steadying her with a grip that was firm but surprisingly gentle. "When did you last eat?" the man asked, and there was something in his voice now, something that sounded almost like anger, except it wasn't directed at her. "I don't—" Elena tried to pull away and found she couldn't, not because he was holding her too tightly, because her legs wouldn't support her weight properly. "That's none of you're malnourished." Again, that tone of absolute certainty, like he could diagnose her entire life from one look. "Dehydrated, in shock, and bleeding. So I'm going to ask you one more time. When did you last eat a real meal?" Elena stared at him, her brain struggling to process what was happening. This man, this absurdly handsome stranger in an expensive suit, was standing in a discount grocery store parking lot in the rain, asking about her nutritional habits like it was his business. "Yesterday," she heard herself say, "I had toast, I think, for breakfast." His jaw tightened. Then he turned his head slightly and made a subtle gesture with one hand. Two men materialized out of the rain, both wearing dark suits, both built like they could break a person in half without effort, both moving with the kind of coordinated precision that made Elena's survival instincts suddenly start screaming. "Get her bags," the first man said quietly. "Put them in my car." One of the large men moved immediately to collect Elena's grocery bags from where she'd dropped them. "Wait," Elena tried to pull away again. "What are you? I don't even know you." "My name is Lucien Moretti." He said it like she should recognize it, like it should mean something. "And you're going to get in my car, let me feed you, and then we're going to have a conversation about why you're destroying yourself." "I'm not getting in your car." Elena finally managed to yank her arm free, stumbling back a step. "Are you insane? I don't know you. You could be a serial killer." Lucian's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "A kidnapper? Something worse?" "Yeah, exactly. I'm not." He took a step closer, and Elena found herself frozen in place by the sheer intensity of his gaze. "But I am someone who watched you get systematically destroyed by that man in the grocery store. I watched him cut you to pieces with words designed to make you feel worthless, and I watched you stand there and take it because you've been trained to believe that's what you deserve." Elena's breath caught. "How long were you—" "Long enough." Lucien's voice dropped lower. "Long enough to see that you're barely surviving, that you're one bad day away from breaking completely. And I'm offering you a choice. You can stand here in the rain with a flat tire and a bleeding hand and tell yourself you're fine. Or you can get in my car and let someone take care of you for one fucking night." Elena should have run. Every rational part of her brain was screaming at her to run. But Grayson's voice was still echoing in her head. Victoria's diamond ring was still burning behind her eyes. The flat tire was still mocking her from 3 feet away. And this stranger, this beautiful, dangerous stranger, was looking at her like she mattered, like she was worth saving. "One night," Elena whispered. Lucien's expression shifted into something that might have been satisfaction or might have been relief. "One night." He held out his hand. Elena looked at it for a long moment, at the strong fingers, the expensive watch, the subtle scars on his knuckles that suggested this man was no stranger to violence. Then she took it. The car was a black sedan that probably cost more than Elena's entire apartment building. Leather interior, tinted windows. The kind of vehicle that screamed money and power and things Elena had never been close to in her entire life. One of the large men opened the back door. Lucien guided her inside with a hand on her lower back, then slid in beside her. The door closed with a heavy, final sound. "Where are we going?" Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lucien was already pulling out his phone, typing something quickly. "My home. You need food, medical attention, and somewhere warm to sit down before you collapse." "I'm not going to collapse." He looked at her with one eyebrow raised. "You fainted in my arms 30 seconds ago." "I didn't faint. I just fainted." He finished typing and pocketed his phone, then turned his full attention on her. "Tell me about the man in the grocery store." Elena's throat tightened. "Why?" "Because I want to know who made you cry." There was something in the way he said it, Something cold and dangerous that made Elena suddenly very aware that she was in a car with a complete stranger who had bodyguards and moved through the world like violence was a language he spoke fluently. "He's my ex-boyfriend," Elena said quietly. "Grayson Vale. We dated for 3 years. He left me for someone better." Better? Lucian repeated the word like it tasted wrong. Define better. Richer, prettier, more educated, better family, better prospects, better everything. And he felt the need to destroy you in a grocery store because... Elena laughed, the sound hollow. Because he could? Because it made him feel good? I don't know. Maybe he thought he was being kind by inviting me to watch him celebrate his engagement to someone who isn't me. Lucien was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was very soft, very controlled. What's his full name? Why? Answer the question. Elena's pulse kicked up. Grayson Alexander Vale. He works at some investment firm downtown. Why does it matter? Lucian didn't answer. Instead, he pulled out his phone again and made a call. Marco, he said when someone answered, I need everything on Grayson Alexander Vale, investment firm, downtown. I want financials, connections, weaknesses, everything, by tomorrow morning. He ended the call and turned back to Elena. What are you doing? She asked, her voice shaking slightly. Making sure no one hurts you again. You can't just... You don't even know me. No, Lucian agreed, but I'm going to. The car pulled up in front of a building that made Elena's breath catch. All glass and steel and modern architecture that touched the sky. The kind of building that had doormen and private elevators and residents who definitely didn't count coins in grocery stores. Come on, Lucien said, opening the door and extending his hand again. Elena took it because she didn't know what else to do. The penthouse was exactly what she'd expected and somehow still managed to shock her. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Furniture that looked like it belonged in museums. Art on the walls that was probably worth more than Elena would make in her entire lifetime. Lucian guided her to a leather sofa and disappeared into another room, returning moments later with a first aid kit. Hand, he said, kneeling in front of her. Elena extended her hand, watching in numb silence as he cleaned the cut with careful precision. His hands were steady, professional, like he'd done this before. You're really good at that, she said quietly. I've had practice. Why? His eyes flicked up to meet hers. Because people in my life have a tendency to get hurt. What do you do? For work, I mean. Lucian finished bandaging her hand and stood, moving to a bar cart and pouring 2 glasses of something amber. I run several businesses, imports, exports, real estate, investments. I keep people employed. I solve problems. He handed her a glass. Elena took a small sip and nearly choked. Whatever it was, it burned going down and probably cost more than her rent. That's very vague, she managed. It's meant to be. Lucian sat down beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off his body. Tell me about yourself, Elena Whitmore. And don't give me the edited version. Give me the truth. Something about the way he said it. The command in his voice, mixed with genuine curiosity, made Elena's defenses crumble. So she told him about growing up poor, about winning a scholarship to college and meeting Grayson and thinking she'd finally escaped, about how he'd slowly convinced her that her dreams were childish, that writing was a waste of time, that she should be grateful he loved her despite her lack of pedigree, about how he'd left her the week after she lost her scholarship due to budget cuts, how she'd dropped out of school, taken the coffee shop job, watched her entire future collapse into survival mode. Lucien listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When she finally fell silent, he set down his glass and turned to face her fully. You're going to that engagement party, he said. Elena blinked. What? Next Saturday, the Rosewood Hotel. You're going, and I'm going with you. That's insane. I'm not going to... Spa. Yes, you are. Lucian's voice was absolute. Because Grayson Vale is going to see exactly what he threw away, and he's going to spend the rest of his miserable life regretting it. Elena stared at him, her heart pounding. Why do you care? Lucien reached out and tucked a strand of wet hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. Because the moment I saw you crying in that parking lot, he said softly, something in me recognized something in you. and I don't let go of things that belong to me. I don't belong to you. His smile was slow and dangerous. Not yet. Elena woke up in a bed that felt like sleeping on a cloud. For a few disoriented seconds, she didn't remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back. The grocery store, Grayson's cruelty, the rain, the flat tire, and Lucien Moretti's dark eyes studying her like she was a puzzle he intended to solve. She sat up slowly, taking in the bedroom. Massive windows overlooking the city skyline, furniture that probably cost more than her yearly salary. Her clothes from yesterday were gone, replaced by a silk robe draped across the foot of the bed. Her phone sat on the nightstand. 8 missed calls from her roommate. 12 texts asking where the hell she was. Elena grabbed the phone and typed out a quick response. I'm fine, stayed with a friend, be back later. The lie tasted bitter, but the truth, that she'd spent the night in a stranger's penthouse, sounded infinitely worse. She found her way to the bathroom and nearly gasped. Marble everywhere. A shower that looked like it belonged in a spa. Toiletries that still had tags on them, clearly purchased specifically for her. 20 minutes later, clean and wearing the robe, Elena ventured out of the bedroom. The smell of coffee led her to the kitchen. Lucien stood at the counter wearing dark slacks and a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms that were far more distracting than they had any right to be. He was reading something on his phone, a cup of espresso in his other hand. He looked up when she entered, and something flickered across his face, something possessive and satisfied that made Elena's stomach flip. You're awake, he said, setting down his phone. Good. Sit. It wasn't a request. Elena found herself moving to the counter and sliding onto a bar stool before she'd consciously decided to obey. Lucien set a plate in front of her. Eggs, bacon, fresh fruit, toast. Real food. The kind Elena hadn't eaten in months. I don't expect you to eat, Lucien interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. We'll talk after. Elena picked up her fork with shaking hands and took a bite. The food was perfect. Of course it was perfect. Everything in Lucien's world seemed to be perfect. She ate in silence while he watched her with that unnerving intensity, like he was memorizing every detail. When she finally set down her fork, Lucien refilled her coffee cup and leaned against the counter across from her. Your car is being fixed, he said. It'll be delivered to your apartment by this afternoon. New tires, oil change, full inspection, whatever else it needs. Elena's throat tightened. You can't just... I can. I did. Lucien's eyes held hers. What's your address? Why? Because I'm having your rent paid for the next 3 months. And before you argue, understand that I've already made the decision. You can give me the address willingly, or I can find it myself. Your choice. Elena set down her coffee cup with more force than necessary. Stop. Just stop. I don't know what kind of game this is, but it's not a game. Lucien moved around the counter with predatory grace, stopping close enough that Elena had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. You're drowning, Elena, and I'm offering you a lifeline. Why? The word came out raw. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. So why are you doing this? Lucien was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working like he was choosing his words carefully. Finally, he said, Because when I was 17, I watched my mother die from pneumonia that could have been treated if she'd had access to basic health care. She was too proud to ask for help, too stubborn to admit she was drowning, and by the time I had the money and resources to save her, it was too late. Elena's breath caught. You remind me of her, Lucien continued, his voice rough. That same stubborn pride, that same determination to suffer alone rather than accept help. And I will not stand by and watch another woman destroy herself because the world convinced her she doesn't deserve better. I'm not your mother. No. His hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb brushing across her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. You're something else entirely, something I didn't expect to find in a grocery store parking lot. But now that I have, I'm not letting go. Elena should have pulled away. Should have told him this was insane. Instead, she leaned into his touch like a plant turning toward the sun. The engagement party, Lucien said, his thumb still tracing patterns on her skin. You're going. With me. And we're going to make sure Grayson Vale understands exactly what he lost. This is crazy. Probably. Lucien's mouth curved into a smile that was equal parts dangerous and beautiful. But I've built an empire on calculated risks, and you, Elena Whitmore, are worth the gamble. Over the next week, Elena's life transformed into something she didn't recognize. A designer showed up at her apartment with dresses. Not one dress. 6 dresses, each more beautiful than the last, each tailored specifically to her measurements that Lucien had somehow obtained. Her phone buzzed with texts from an unknown number that she quickly realized was Lucien. Did you eat breakfast? Your car is in your building's parking lot. Keys with the doorman. There's a package at your door. Open it. The package contained books. First editions of novels Elena had mentioned loving during their late-night conversation. Books she'd sold years ago to pay rent. Elena stared at them for 20 minutes before she could breathe properly. At work, flowers arrived. Massive arrangements that made her coworkers whisper and stare. No card. But Elena knew. She tried to call him, to tell him to stop, to explain that this was too much, too fast, too overwhelming. He didn't answer. Instead, he showed up at the coffee shop during her shift. Elena looked up from steaming milk and her heart stopped. Lucien stood at the counter wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than every piece of furniture in the entire cafe combined. His presence seemed to suck all the air out of the room. Other customers stared. Her manager nearly dropped a tray. Black coffee, Lucien said calmly, like he ordered coffee from terrified baristas every day, which he probably did. Elena's hands shook as she poured. You can't keep doing this. Doing what? This. She gestured helplessly at the flowers wilting slightly in the corner, at the expensive books waiting at her apartment, at him. All of this. It's too much. Lucien accepted the coffee and handed her $100 bill. Keep the change. Lucien. He leaned across the counter, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something dark and expensive and absolutely devastating. Saturday night, he said quietly. I'll pick you up at 6. Wear the black dress, the one with the open back. How did you know which? I know everything about you, Elena. His eyes held hers with terrifying intensity. What you drink, what you read, what makes you smile, what makes you cry. And by the time this is over, I'll know every other secret you're hiding. He straightened and walked out, leaving Elena standing behind the counter with her heart hammering and her coworkers staring at her like she'd just been visited by a beautiful, well-dressed storm. Her manager appeared at her elbow. Who the hell was that? I don't know, Elena whispered. But that was a lie. She knew exactly who Lucien Moretti was. She just didn't know why he'd decided she was worth this much attention. Thursday night, Elena's roommate cornered her in their tiny kitchen. Okay, spill, Jessica demanded, blocking the refrigerator with her body. Who's the mystery man sending you flowers and expensive gifts? And don't say just a friend, because friends don't send first edition novels and designer dresses. Elena sighed, pulling out her phone and showing Jessica the texts. Jessica's eyes widened as she scrolled. Holy shit! Elena, this guy is either deeply in love with you or a serial killer. Possibly both. I met him a week ago. A week ago? Jessica's voice hit a pitch that probably bothered dogs. You met this man a week ago, and you're going to Grayson's engagement party with him. Are you insane? Probably. Does he know you're broke? He knows everything. Elena took her phone back. That's the problem. He knows I'm broke and drowning and barely keeping it together, and instead of running away like any sane person, he's helping. People don't just help, Elena, not without wanting something in return. I know. So what does he want? Elena thought about Lucien's hand on her cheek. His voice saying, you're something else entirely. The way he looked at her like she was precious and rare and worth protecting. I don't know, she said quietly, but I think I'm going to find out Saturday night. Saturday arrived like a storm on the horizon. Elena spent the afternoon in a state of barely controlled panic, trying on the black dress 3 times and nearly talking herself out of going at least 7 times. The dress was obscene. That was the only word for it. Silk that hugged every curve, a neckline that plunged just enough to be dangerous, and a back that was completely bare except for thin straps crossing her shoulder blades. She looked like someone else, someone confident, someone powerful, someone who belonged on Lucien Moretti's arm. At exactly 6 o'clock, her phone buzzed. I'm downstairs. Elena grabbed her clutch with shaking hands and headed for the door. Jessica whistled low. Jesus Christ, you look like you could kill a man with that dress. That's the idea. Be careful, Elena. Men like that, men with money and power and the ability to make your life better with a snap of their fingers. They're dangerous because they can make your life infinitely worse just as easily. Elena thought about Lucien's dark eyes, his careful hands bandaging her cut, the books he'd bought because she'd mentioned them once. I know, she said, but she walked out the door anyway. Lucien was leaning against the black sedan and Elena's breath caught in her throat. He wore a tuxedo that fit him like a lethal weapon, hair swept back, sharp jawline, eyes that tracked her every movement as she approached. When she reached him, he didn't say anything for a long moment, just looked at her like she was the only thing in the world worth seeing. You're stunning, he finally said, his voice rough. You're not so bad yourself. Lucien's mouth curved into a smile that was pure sin. He opened the car door for her, and as she slid inside, his hand settled on her lower back, warm against her bare skin, possessive, claiming. The drive to the Rosewood Hotel took 20 minutes. Lucien spent most of it on his phone, speaking in rapid Italian to someone Elena couldn't see. His tone was cold, commanding, absolutely terrifying. When he hung up, she asked, "Business?" "Always." He pocketed his phone and turned his full attention on her. "Are you ready for this?" "No." "Good. Honesty." Lucien reached out and took her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. "Listen to me carefully, Elena. What's about to happen in that ballroom is going to be uncomfortable. Grayson is going to see you with me, and he's going to realize he made a mistake. A catastrophic mistake. And he's going to try to make you doubt yourself. I'm used to it. I know. But tonight, you're not alone." Lucien's grip tightened slightly. "Tonight, you're with me. And no one, not Grayson, not his vapid fiancé, not anyone in that room, gets to make you feel small. Understood?" Elena nodded, her throat too tight for words. The Rosewood Hotel was exactly as pretentious as she'd expected. All marble and crystal and people who'd never worried about rent in their entire lives. Lucien's hand stayed firm on her lower back as they walked through the entrance. People stared. Elena heard whispers. "Is that Lucien Moretti? What's he doing here?" They entered the ballroom and the effect was immediate. Conversations died mid-sentence. Heads turned. A man in an expensive suit went pale and immediately pulled out his phone. Lucien seemed completely unbothered by the attention. He guided Elena through the crowd with calm authority, nodding to a few people but stopping for no one. Then Elena saw Grayson. He stood near the bar with Victoria, laughing at something a colleague said. He looked exactly like he always did, polished, confident, untouchable. Until he saw Elena. His face went through several emotions in rapid succession: confusion, recognition, shock. Then he saw Lucien, and all the color drained from his features. "Elena?" Grayson crossed the ballroom with quick strides, Victoria trailing behind, looking confused. "What are you? I didn't think you'd actually—" He stopped dead when he got close enough to recognize who Elena was with. "Grayson Vale," Lucien said pleasantly, extending his hand. "I don't believe we've met. Lucien Moretti." Grayson's hand shook when he took it. "Mr. Moretti, this is— what a surprise." "Is it?" Lucien's smile was sharp. "Elena told me all about your invitation. I thought it would be rude not to attend." Victoria appeared at Grayson's elbow, her perfect smile firmly in place. "Elena, you came, and you brought a date." "Fiancé, actually," Lucien said smoothly, and Elena's heart stopped. "What?" The word escaped before she could stop it. Lucien's arm tightened around her waist in warning. "We haven't made the formal announcement yet, but yes, Elena and I are engaged." Elena's mind went completely blank. Grayson looked like he'd been punched. "Engaged? You're engaged to Elena." "Is that so difficult to believe?" Lucien's tone was mild, but his eyes were ice. "Your loss is my extraordinary gain. How long have you been—" Grayson's voice cracked slightly. "You just broke up 6 months ago. When you know, you know." Lucien pulled Elena closer, his hand splayed possessively across her bare back. "Isn't that right, darling?" Elena's training as a barista kicked in. Smile through the pain, keep your composure, don't let them see you break. Absolutely, she heard herself say. Victoria's smile had frozen into something brittle. How lovely. Grayson, didn't you say Elena was working at a coffee shop? She is, Grayson said faintly, still staring at Lucien like he was seeing a ghost. Was, Lucien corrected. Elena's focus is her writing now. I've been encouraging her to pursue her passion full time. The knife slid in so smoothly Grayson probably didn't even feel it at first. Her writing, he repeated. Her novel, the one she's been working on. Lucien's smile widened fractionally. It's brilliant, actually. My publishing contacts are already fighting over it. Elena wanted to scream, wanted to tell Lucien to stop lying, that there was no novel, that she hadn't written anything in years. But Grayson's face had gone from pale to ashen. You're publishing a book, he said to Elena, his voice hollow. We're in talks, Elena managed, following Lucien's lead, even though she had no idea where this was going. That's, Grayson swallowed hard. That's great, really great. I always said you had talent. No, Elena said quietly, finding her voice. You said writing was a fantasy for rich people who could afford to fail. I believe those were your exact words. Silence. Victoria shifted uncomfortably. Grayson opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I was trying to be realistic, he finally said. You were trying to be cruel. Lucien's voice was soft and absolutely lethal. But fortunately, Elena found someone who recognizes her worth. A photographer appeared, camera raised. Mr. Vale, Miss Ashford, could we get a photo of the happy couple? Of course! Victoria's mask snapped back into place. She grabbed Grayson's arm and posed, all teeth and diamonds. The photographer snapped several shots, then turned to Lucien and Elena. And you two? You make such a striking couple. No, thank you, Elena started to say. We'd love to, Lucien said at the same time. He pulled Elena against him with smooth efficiency, one hand on her waist, the other coming up to tilt her chin toward him. Smile, he murmured, low enough that only she could hear. Show him what he lost. Elena smiled. The camera flashed, and Grayson Vale looked like he wanted to throw himself off the nearest balcony. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of champagne and conversation, and Lucien's hand never leaving some part of Elena's body. Her waist, her back, her hand, always touching, always claiming, always making it clear she belonged to him. People approached them constantly. Businessmen who wanted to talk to Lucien, women who wanted to know where Elena got her dress. Everyone treated them like royalty. Elena played her part, smiled, laughed, pretended she wasn't screaming internally. Around 10 o'clock, she excused herself to the bathroom. The ladies' room was all marble and gold fixtures and mirrors that seemed specifically designed to make you examine every flaw. Elena braced her hands on the counter and tried to breathe. The door opened behind her. Victoria Ashford walked in, her perfect smile finally cracked around the edges. So, she said, moving to the mirror beside Elena and pulling out lipstick. Lucien Moretti. That's quite an upgrade from coffee shop employee. Elena's hands tightened on the counter. Is there something you want to say to me? Just curious how you managed it. Victoria's reflection met Elena's in the mirror. Grayson said you were barely scraping by, and now suddenly you're engaged to one of the most powerful men on the East Coast? Maybe he likes me for who I am. Victoria laughed. It wasn't a kind sound. Men like Lucien Moretti don't fall in love with baristas, sweetie. They collect things, trophies. And you? She turned to face Elena directly. You're clearly a project, something he's polishing up to show off. But don't fool yourself into thinking it's real. You don't know anything about us. I know men. Victoria's smile sharpened. And I know that whatever game you think you're playing, you're way out of your league. Lucien Moretti is dangerous, the kind of dangerous that gets people hurt. And when he's done with you, and he will get done with you, you're going to wish you'd stayed in your little coffee shop with your little life. The bathroom door opened again. A woman in a red dress walked in, took one look at the tension, and quickly retreated. Elena's voice came out steady despite the trembling in her hands. Are you finished? Just offering some friendly advice. Victoria touched up her lipstick with practiced ease. But by all means, enjoy your fairy tale while it lasts. She swept out, leaving Elena alone with her reflection and the echo of doubts that were starting to sound a lot like truth. Elena returned to the ballroom to find Lucien in deep conversation with a man who looked vaguely familiar. A politician, maybe. Or a lawyer. Someone important enough that even Victoria's father was hovering nearby, looking nervous. Lucien's eyes found Elena the moment she entered the room. He excused himself from the conversation with smooth efficiency and crossed to her in long strides. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." His jaw tightened. "Don't lie to me, Elena. What happened?" "Victoria cornered me in the bathroom, said I was a project, a trophy, that you're dangerous and you'll get bored and—" Elena's voice cracked. "She's right, isn't she? This whole thing is insane. We don't know each other. You can't possibly want—" Lucien's hand came up to cup her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Listen to me very carefully," he said, his voice low and intense. "Victoria Ashford is a vapid socialite who married for money and status and can't comprehend that someone might value anything else. She sees the world through a lens of transactions because that's the only language she speaks. But that's not us. Then what is us? I don't know yet." Lucien's thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "But I know that when I saw you crying in that parking lot, something in me shifted. I know that I think about you constantly. I know that I want to destroy anyone who's ever hurt you, and I know that I'm not letting you go. Why? Because you're mine." He said it like it was a simple fact, like gravity. "And I protect what's mine." Before Elena could respond, a commotion erupted near the entrance. Men in dark suits were entering the ballroom. Professional. Coordinated. Moving with the kind of purpose that made Elena's survival instincts start screaming. FBI. The letters were emblazoned across their jackets. "Ladies and gentlemen," one of them announced, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent ballroom, "we apologize for the interruption. We're looking for Grayson Alexander Vale." Grayson went white. "There must be some mistake," he said, his voice shaking. "I don't—" "Grayson Alexander Vale, you're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering." The agent pulled out handcuffs with practiced efficiency. "You have the right to remain silent." The ballroom exploded into chaos. Victoria screamed. Guests pulled out phones. Cameras flashed. Grayson's father rushed forward, shouting about lawyers. Elena stood frozen, watching it all unfold like a nightmare. Then she felt Lucien's breath against her ear. "I told you," he murmured. "No one gets to hurt you and walk away." Elena's blood went cold. She turned slowly to look at him, and something in his expression, satisfaction, possessiveness, absolute certainty, made everything click into place. "You did this," she whispered. "I did." "How?" "Grayson's been stealing from investors for years, laundering money through shell corporations. I had my people dig into his financials. The evidence was remarkably easy to find once I knew where to look." Lucien's hand tightened on her waist. "The FBI has been building a case for months. I simply expedited the process." Elena couldn't breathe. "You destroyed him." "Yes. Because he made me cry in a grocery store, among other reasons." Lucien's eyes held hers without remorse. "But primarily, yes. Because he made you cry. Because he tried to make you feel worthless. Because he threw away something precious and needed to understand the consequences." "You're insane." "Probably." His mouth curved into that dangerous smile. "But I'm your kind of insane, Elena. And the sooner you accept that, the easier this will be." The FBI agents were leading Grayson out in handcuffs. Victoria was sobbing dramatically. Guests were fleeing like rats from a sinking ship. And Lucien Moretti stood there holding Elena like she was the only stable thing in a world gone mad. "I need to go," Elena said, her voice shaking. "I need to leave. I need to think." "No." "Lucien, you can leave if you want." His grip loosened slightly, giving her the option. "I won't stop you, but understand that if you walk away now, I'm going to give you exactly 3 days to process what happened. And then I'm coming for you. And when I do, I'm not letting you run again." Elena stared at him, her heart hammering, her mind screaming at her to flee. But her traitorous body leaned into his warmth. "Why 3 days?" Lucien's smile widened. Because that's how long I can stand being away from you before I lose my mind completely. You barely know me. I know enough. His hand came up to tangle in her hair. I know you're terrified right now. I know you're trying to convince yourself that I'm a monster, and I know that despite all of that, you haven't pulled away. You're still here, still letting me touch you, still looking at me like I'm something other than the nightmare everyone else sees. What am I supposed to do with this? Elena's voice cracked. You just destroyed a man's life in front of 500 people because he was cruel to me. That's not normal. That's not... I never claimed to be normal. Lucian pulled her closer until they were pressed together and she could feel his heartbeat against her chest. I'm a dangerous man, Elena. I've done terrible things. I've hurt people. I've built an empire on fear and violence and carefully calculated revenge. But with you? His voice dropped to a whisper. With you? I want to be something better, something worth keeping. Sirens wailed outside. Camera flashes lit up the ballroom like lightning. And Elena Whitmore stood in the arms of a man who'd just proven exactly how far he'd go to protect her. 3 days, she whispered. Lucian's eyes blazed with triumph and something darker, something possessive. 3 days, he agreed. And then you're mine, Elena, completely. No more running, no more doubts. Mine. He kissed her then, hard and claiming and absolutely devastating. And when Elena finally pulled away, breathless and shaking, she realized with perfect clarity that she was already lost. The question wasn't whether she'd belong to Lucien Moretti. The question was whether she'd survive what that belonging would cost. Elena didn't go home that night. She sat in the back of Lucien's sedan watching the city lights blur past while her mind tried to process what had just happened. Grayson arrested. His life destroyed. 500 witnesses watching him led away in handcuffs while cameras flashed and his fiancée sobbed. All because Lucien Moretti had decided Elena was worth protecting. The car pulled up to Lucien's building and Elena found herself moving on autopilot. Through the lobby, into the private elevator, up to the penthouse where this had all started a week ago. A week. 1 week since she'd been crying in a parking lot with a flat tire. Now she was standing in a multi-million-dollar penthouse with a man who'd just orchestrated the complete destruction of her ex-boyfriend's life like it was nothing. Lucien poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed her one. Elena drank it in one burning swallow. Talk to me, Lucien said quietly. What do you want me to say? Elena's voice came out sharper than she intended. Thank you for committing what I'm pretty sure was multiple felonies on my behalf. Congratulations on being a terrifying human being. You're angry. Of course I'm angry. Elena slammed the glass down on the counter hard enough that she was surprised it didn't shatter. You didn't ask me if I wanted this. You didn't consult me before you decided to destroy another person's entire existence. You just did it. Lucien's expression didn't change. Would you have said yes if I'd asked? That's not the point. It's exactly the point. He moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the quiet room. You would have said no. You would have told me Grayson wasn't worth it, that you didn't want revenge, that you'd rather suffer in silence than cause anyone else pain, because that's who you are, Elena. You'd rather bleed quietly than make someone else hurt. And that's bad? It's self-destructive. Lucien's keen hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing across her cheekbone. Grayson Vale was stealing millions from innocent people. He was laundering money for some very dangerous individuals. The FBI would have caught him eventually. I simply accelerated the timeline. Because he made me cry. Yes. No hesitation, no shame. Because he made you cry. Because he humiliated you. Because he tried to convince you that you were worthless when you're anything but. Elena pulled away from his touch, wrapping her arms around herself. You said I had 3 days to think. I need to go home. No? Lucien, it's 2 a.m, you're exhausted, you're in shock, and your apartment is 40 minutes away. His voice softened slightly. Stay tonight. Use the guest room if you want space, but don't leave like this. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to storm out and prove she wasn't some helpless thing that needed protecting. But she was exhausted, bone-deep tired in a way that had nothing to do with physical sleep. Guest room, she said finally. Lucien nodded, something that might have been relief flickering across his face. "I'll show you." The guest room was smaller than the master suite, but still absurdly luxurious. Lucien handed her a t-shirt to sleep in, his, judging by the size, and left without another word. Elena changed mechanically and crawled into bed. She didn't sleep. Instead, she stared at the ceiling and tried to figure out who the hell she'd become. The woman who went to engagement parties with mafia bosses, who wore designer dresses and let dangerous men kiss her in front of cameras, who watched her ex-boyfriend get arrested and felt a sick, twisted satisfaction burning in her chest. That wasn't her. Except it was. Because some dark part of Elena, some part she'd kept buried under layers of good behavior and people-pleasing and desperate attempts to be worthy, had wanted exactly what Lucien gave her: revenge, validation, proof that Grayson was wrong about her, and that realization was more terrifying than anything else that had happened tonight. Morning came with weak sunlight filtering through expensive curtains. Elena found Lucien in the kitchen again, already dressed in slacks and a crisp white shirt, reading something on his tablet while drinking espresso. He looked up when she entered and his eyes tracked over her appearance. His oversized t-shirt hitting her mid-thigh, her hair a mess, no makeup, completely vulnerable. His expression shifted into something possessive and hungry that made Elena's stomach flip. "Coffee?" he asked, his voice rougher than usual. "Please?" He poured her a cup and slid it across the counter. They stood in silence for a long moment, the air between them thick with unspoken things. Finally, Elena said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth." "Always." "Why me?" The question came out raw. "You could have anyone. Any woman in this city would kill to be standing where I am right now. So why the broke barista with no prospects and a mountain of student debt?" Lucien set down his tablet and gave her his full attention. "Because everyone else wants what I can give them," he said simply. "Money, power, access, status. You're the first person I've met in a decade who looked at all of this." He gestured at the penthouse, at himself, at everything, and seemed completely unimpressed. "I'm not unimpressed. I'm terrified." "Exactly." His mouth curved into a slight smile. "You should be terrified, because I am dangerous, Elena. I've done things that would make you run screaming. I've hurt people, killed people, built an empire on fear and violence and carefully orchestrated destruction." Elena's breath caught. "You've killed people." "Yes." The word hung in the air between them like a blade. "And you're just telling me this?" "You asked for truth." Lucien moved around the counter with predatory grace, stopping close enough that Elena could feel the heat radiating off his body. "So here's the truth. I'm not a good man. I'm not someone you should trust. I'm exactly the kind of monster parents warn their daughters about. But with you?" His hand came up to tangle in her hair. "With you, I want to be something different, something worth keeping." "People don't just change because they want to." "No," Lucien agreed. "They change because they find something worth changing for." He kissed her then, slow and deep and devastating. Elena knew she should pull away, should run, should do literally anything except kiss him back. She kissed him back. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lucien rested his forehead against hers. "3 days," he murmured. "You have 3 days to decide if you can live with what I am. Use them wisely." Elena spent those 3 days in a fog of confusion and denial. She went back to her apartment, back to work, tried to pretend her life was normal. It didn't work. Her phone buzzed constantly with texts from Lucien. Never pushy, never demanding, just there. "Did you eat breakfast? How was work? I'm thinking about you." Her coworkers whispered every time she walked past. Someone had posted photos from the engagement party online. Elena in that black dress on Lucien's arm. The kiss. Grayson being led away in handcuffs. The images had gone viral. Jessica cornered her Tuesday night with a bottle of wine and a laptop full of search results. "Okay, so I Googled your boyfriend," Jessica said, pouring them both generous glasses. "And holy shit, Elena, do you have any idea who Lucien Moretti actually is? He told me he runs several businesses. He runs the entire East Coast criminal underworld." Jessica turned the laptop around, showing Elena article after article. Connections to organized crime, suspected involvement in money laundering, racketeering, extortion. A list of associates who'd mysteriously disappeared over the years. Photos of Lucien at charity galas standing next to politicians and businessmen who all looked vaguely terrified. One headline read, "The Gentleman Criminal, How Lucien Moretti Built an Empire on Blood and Silk." Elena's hands started shaking. "He's a mobster," Jessica said flatly, "like an actual for-real mafia boss. And you're—" She gestured helplessly at Elena. "You're what exactly? His girlfriend? His project? His next victim?" "He wouldn't hurt me." "How do you know?" Elena opened her mouth, closed it, because how did she know? A week. She'd known him for a week. "I just do," she finally said, the words sounding hollow even to her own ears. Jessica grabbed Elena's hands across the table. "Listen to me. I love you. You're my best friend, and I am begging you to be smart about this. Men like Lucien Moretti don't fall in love with normal people. They collect them, use them, and when they're done, they throw them away." Victoria said the same thing. "Then maybe you should listen," Jessica's voice cracked. "Because I don't want to identify your body 6 months from now when he gets bored and decides you know too much." Elena pulled her hands away. "It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" Elena didn't have an answer. Wednesday morning, a package arrived at her apartment. Inside was a manuscript, thick, professional, with Elena's name on the cover. Her hands shook as she opened it. It was her writing, not recent writing, stories she'd written years ago, in college, before Grayson had convinced her it was a waste of time. Pieces she'd posted online under a pseudonym and then deleted in a fit of self-loathing. Lucien had found them, compiled them, printed them. There was a note tucked inside the front cover in handwriting that was surprisingly elegant for someone who'd admitted to murder. "You have a gift. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise, including yourself. L." Elena read the manuscript for 3 hours straight. It wasn't terrible. Some of it was actually good. She'd forgotten that she could do this, could create something from nothing, could make people feel things with just words on a page. Grayson had systematically destroyed that belief, told her she was wasting her time, that real artists were born, not made, that she should focus on practical things like finding a stable job and not embarrassing herself with delusions of creativity. And she'd believed him. Let him kill the part of her that dreamed. Elena looked at the manuscript in her hands and felt something crack open in her chest, something angry and raw and long buried. She grabbed her phone and called Lucien before she could second-guess herself. He answered on the first ring. "Elena." "The manuscript," she said, her voice shaking. "How did you find those stories?" "I have good people. They're very thorough." "That's creepy." "Probably." She could hear the smile in his voice. "But you're calling me, which means you read it. What did you think?" "I think—" Elena's throat tightened. "I think I forgot I could be good at something, and I'm angry that I forgot, and I'm angry that you had to remind me." "Good. Anger is useful. What are you going to do with it?" "I don't know." "Lie." Lucien's voice softened. "You know exactly what you want to do. You're just scared to want it." Elena closed her eyes. "If I say yes to this, to you, to all of it, what happens?" "You move in with me. You quit that terrible job. You write, and I protect you while you do it. That's not a relationship. That's a transaction. Everything is a transaction, Elena. The only difference is what you're trading." A pause. "I'm offering you safety, resources, and the freedom to pursue what you actually want. In exchange, you give me you." "That's insane." "So you keep saying, and yet you're still on the phone." Elena opened her eyes and looked around her tiny apartment. Cracked walls, broken heating, the constant smell of her neighbor's cooking seeping through the vents. This wasn't a life. This was survival. And she was so fucking tired of just surviving. "I need to see you," she said. "I'll send a car." "No, I'll come to you. Give me the address." Lucien was quiet for a moment. "You know where I live, Elena. Not the penthouse. Your real home. The one you mentioned, where you actually spend your time. Another pause, longer this time. You're sure? No, but send me the address anyway. The address led her an hour outside the city to a property that could only be described as an estate. Stone walls, iron gates, security that made Elena's stomach clench. The guard at the gate checked her ID against a list and waved her through with an expression that suggested he already knew exactly who she was. The main house sat at the end of a long driveway lined with trees, Italian architecture, beautiful and imposing and absolutely terrifying in its obvious wealth. Lucien was waiting on the front steps. He wore jeans and a dark sweater, more casual than Elena had ever seen him, and somehow even more devastating because of it. She got out of her car and stood there, suddenly uncertain. "You came," Lucien said, walking down the steps toward her. "You sound surprised." "I thought you might run." "I still might." His mouth curved into that dangerous smile. "Fair enough. Come inside, there's something I need to show you." The interior of the house was exactly what Elena had expected. Expensive furniture, priceless art, everything carefully curated to project power and wealth. But there were also small things that felt personal. Books stacked on side tables, a worn leather chair by the fireplace, photos on the mantle of people who were clearly family. Lucien led her through the house to a room at the back, his study, judging by the massive desk and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. He closed the door behind them and locked it. Elena's pulse kicked up. "Why did you lock the door?" "Because what I'm about to tell you can't leave this room." Lucien moved to a painting on the wall and swung it aside, revealing a safe. He input a code and pulled out a thick folder. "You wanted the truth. Here it is." He handed her the folder. Elena opened it with shaking hands. Inside were documents, financial records, photographs, surveillance reports, all about her. Her breath stopped. There were bank statements showing her debts, credit card bills, records of every place she'd worked for the past 3 years, photos of her apartment building, her coffee shop, her daily routine mapped out in meticulous detail, and the dates on the earliest documents made her stomach turn. 6 months ago. Before the grocery store, before the parking lot, before any of it. "You were watching me," Elena whispered. "Before we met, you were already watching me." Lucien's expression didn't change. "Yes." "Why?" "Because Grayson Vale was laundering money through his investment firm. Money that belonged to some very dangerous people who needed it tracked. And you," he gestured at the folder, "were his ex-girlfriend. Someone who might have information, someone who might be useful." Elena felt like she was falling. "So, this was all... everything. You approached me because you thought I could help you destroy Grayson." Initially, yes. The word hit her like a physical blow. "You lied to me." Elena's voice shook with rage and betrayal. "You told me you saw me crying and something shifted. You made me think that you actually... I didn't lie." Lucien took a step toward her and Elena backed away like he was on fire. "I was investigating you as part of a larger operation. That's true. But the moment I saw you in that parking lot, everything changed. You stopped being a lead and became..." "What? Your project? Your redemption arc?" Elena threw the folder at him, papers scattered across the expensive floor. "You've been manipulating me from the beginning. The car, the rent, the books, the fucking manuscript. All of it designed to make me trust you, to make me dependent on you." "Elena, don't." She held up a shaking hand. "Don't you dare say my name like it means something to you. I was a mark, an investigation, and you let me think." Her voice cracked and she hated herself for it. Lucien's jaw tightened. "You weren't just a mark. You stopped being a mark the first time we spoke. Everything after that was real." "How am I supposed to believe anything you say?" Elena's vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. "You've been lying since the moment we met, watching me, investigating me. Probably laughing at how easy it was to manipulate the desperate broke girl who..." "I have never laughed at you." Lucien's voice cut through her tirade with sharp precision. "Not once. Not ever. You want to know the truth? Fine. Here's the truth. I started investigating you because of Grayson, but I kept investigating you because I became obsessed. I read every word you'd ever written online. I tracked down your college professors to ask about you. I learned everything I could because I was desperate to understand how someone who'd been through what you'd been through could still be kind, still be hopeful, still believe in things like love and second chances when the world had systematically destroyed every reason to believe. Elena stared at him, her chest heaving. You were supposed to be a footnote in a case file, Lucien continued, his voice rough. And instead you became the only thing I could think about. The only person who made me want to be something other than what I am. So yes, I investigated you. Yes, I manipulated circumstances to bring us together. And yes, I orchestrated Grayson's arrest partially as revenge for what he did to you. But none of that changes the fact that He stopped abruptly. That you what? Elena demanded. Lucien looked at her with an expression she'd never seen before. Vulnerable, almost desperate. That I love you, he said quietly. I know it's too soon. I know it's insane. I know you have every reason not to believe me. But I love you, Elena, and I will spend the rest of my life proving it if you'll let me. The words hung in the air between them. Elena wanted to scream, wanted to throw something, wanted to run out of this house and never look back. Instead, she heard herself say, "Show me the rest." What? The folder only had financial records and surveillance. But if you were really investigating me as a lead on Grayson, there would be more. Show me everything. Lucien hesitated. Show me, Elena repeated, her voice hard. He moved back to the safe and pulled out another folder, thicker than the first. Elena took it and started reading. This folder contained interrogation reports. Not of her, of people who knew her. Her roommate Jessica, her manager at the coffee shop, former professors, even her estranged mother, who Elena hadn't spoken to in 5 years. All of them questioned about Elena's relationship with Grayson, her habits, her friends, her vulnerabilities. And buried in the middle of the file was a document that made Elena's blood run cold. A psychological profile, written by someone with credentials in behavioral analysis, detailing Elena's personality traits, likely responses to various stimuli, and, this was the part that made bile rise in her throat, recommendations for how best to gain her trust. Subject responds well to acts of service and protection. History of abandonment suggests she will form strong attachments to anyone who demonstrates consistent care. Recommend approach based on rescue dynamic. Subject's low self-esteem makes her vulnerable to attention from high-status individuals. Elena read it 3 times, each word burning itself into her brain. This is a manual, she said, her voice hollow. You literally created a manual on how to manipulate me. It was standard procedure for the investigation. Stop calling it an investigation, Elena's voice cracked. You psychologically profiled me like I was some kind of suspect. You mapped out my weaknesses. You identified exactly how to make me fall for you, and then you followed the fucking playbook. That's not what happened. That's exactly what happened. Elena threw the folder at him again. The parking lot, the food, the car, the rent, the books. Every single move you made was calculated, designed specifically to exploit my abandonment issues and low self-worth. You didn't fall in love with me, Lucien. You executed a plan. The plan changed. Lucien's hands clenched into fists at his sides. Yes, I approached you strategically. Yes, I used information from the profile initially. But everything after that first night was real. The books were because I genuinely wanted you to remember your dreams. The manuscript was because I think you're talented. How am I supposed to know what's real? Elena's voice broke completely. How am I supposed to trust any of this when you've proven you're willing to psychologically manipulate me to get what you want? Silence fell like a weight. Lucien looked at her with something that might have been anguish if she could still believe anything she saw in his face. I don't know, he finally said. I don't know how to prove it's real, except to say that I would burn down the entire world before I let anyone hurt you, including myself. So if you want to leave, leave. If you want to hate me, hate me. But know that regardless of how this started, I love you. And that's the only truth that matters. Elena laughed, the sound edged with hysteria. You're asking me to trust a man who stalked me, profiled me, and manipulated me into a relationship. Do you understand how insane that is? Yes. Then why are you surprised I'm leaving? She turned toward the door. Elena. Lucian's voice stopped her, but she didn't turn around. If you walk out that door, I won't follow you. I'll give you space, time, whatever you need. But understand that 3 months ago, Grayson Vale didn't just steal money from investors. He stole from the Calabrese family, and the Calabrese family doesn't forget debts. Elena went cold. What does that have to do with me? You dated him for 3 years, lived with him for 2. The Calabrese family knows that, and they will assume you know where he hid their money. I don't know anything. They won't believe you. Lucien's voice was quiet. Careful. They will take you. They will torture you for information you don't have. And when they realize you truly don't know anything, they will kill you. Not quickly, not kindly, just kill you. Elena turned around slowly. You're threatening me. I'm warning you. Lucien met her eyes. The surveillance I had on you wasn't just about the investigation. It was protection. My people watching your apartment, following you to work, making sure the Calabrese family didn't get to you first. That protection ends the moment you walk out of my life, because I can't protect someone who won't let me. So my choices are stay with the man who manipulated me or die. Elena's voice shook with rage. That's what you're offering. Your choices are stay with the man who loves you despite starting in the worst possible way, or try to survive on your own against people who will absolutely kill you. Lucian's expression was stone. I'm not the good choice, Elena. I'm just the only choice that keeps you alive. You son of a bitch. Probably. Elena stared at him, her mind racing through impossible calculations. He was right. She hated that he was right. If the Calabrese family was really after her, she had no chance alone. No resources, no protection, no way to fight back against organized criminals who'd already proven they were willing to kill. But staying with Lucien meant accepting that everything between them was built on lies. Meant trusting a man who'd psychologically profiled her vulnerabilities and exploited them with surgical precision. Meant becoming exactly what Victoria had accused her of being. A trophy, a project, a thing to be possessed. I hate you, Elena whispered. I know. I will never forgive you for this. I know that too. And if I stay, it's not because I love you. It's because you've backed me into a corner where staying alive means staying with you. Something that might have been pain flickered across Lucien's face. Understood. Elena looked around the study with its expensive books and priceless art, and the psychological profile lying scattered on the floor like evidence of her own stupidity. Then she looked at Lucien, at the man who'd claimed to love her while systematically dismantling every defense she had. I want my own room, she said, her voice dead. I want access to your financials so I can see exactly how much power you actually have. I want the names of everyone who was involved in investigating me, and I want you to leave me alone unless I specifically request your presence. Lucien's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Done. And if I find out you're still manipulating me, even once, even slightly, I will find a way to destroy you. I don't care if it kills me in the process. Fair. Elena moved toward the door, then stopped with her hand on the knob. One more thing, she said without turning around. Don't ever tell me you love me again. Because those words don't mean anything coming from someone who approached me with a psychological playbook on how to exploit my weaknesses. She left before he could respond, walking through the beautiful house that would apparently be her prison, feeling the weight of impossible choices crushing down on her shoulders. Behind her, she heard the sound of something shattering. Glass, maybe, or a vase, or possibly just whatever illusion she'd been stupid enough to believe about men who claimed to rescue broken women in parking lots. Elena found a bedroom far from the master suite and locked herself inside. Only then did she let herself cry. Not for Grayson, not for the life she'd lost, but for the dream she'd almost believed, that someone powerful and dangerous could look at her and see something worth loving. That dream was dead now, and Elena had no idea how to survive what came next when her only choice was to live with the man who'd killed it. Elena spent the first 3 days in that bedroom barely eating, barely sleeping, and absolutely refusing to speak to Lucien beyond clipped one-word answers when he knocked to ask if she needed anything. She didn't need anything, except maybe a time machine to go back and warn herself that getting into that black sedan would destroy every certainty she had left about who she was. On the 4th day, she finally ventured out. The house was massive, and she quickly discovered that Lucien wasn't lying about giving her space. He seemed to materialize only when she was in common areas, always keeping distance, always watching her with an expression that looked like he was memorizing someone he expected to lose. Good. He should expect to lose her. Elena found a library on the second floor that took her breath away despite her determination to remain unimpressed. Floor-to-ceiling shelves. First editions. Reading chairs positioned near windows that overlook gardens she hadn't noticed before. She was examining a collection of early American literature when she heard footsteps behind her. "You have good taste," a woman's voice said. Accented. Italian, Elena thought. She turned to find an elegant woman in her 60s standing in the doorway. Silver hair pulled back, sharp eyes that reminded Elena uncomfortably of Lucien's. "I'm sorry," Elena said. "I didn't know anyone else was here. This is my home too. Or it was, before I moved to the guest house." The woman moved into the library with the kind of grace that came from a lifetime of confidence. "I'm Lucien's aunt, Bianca Moretti. And you must be Elena, the woman who has my nephew destroying priceless vases and looking like his world is ending." Elena's throat tightened. "He told you about me." "He tells me everything eventually." Bianca settled into one of the reading chairs and gestured for Elena to sit. "Though I must admit, I fell in love with a woman while investigating her ex-boyfriend, and now she hates me because she found out was a new one. He didn't fall in love with me. He executed a psychological manipulation strategy." "Did he?" Bianca's eyebrow arched. "Strange, because the Lucien I know doesn't lose sleep over manipulation targets, doesn't break furniture when they're angry with him, and definitely doesn't give them complete access to his financials and private documents because they demanded it." Elena blinked. "He actually gave me access. Check your email. He sent the information 2 days ago." Bianca studied Elena with unsettling intensity. "My nephew has done terrible things, Elena. He's hurt people, killed people, built an empire on fear and carefully calculated violence. But I have never in 34 years seen him love anyone the way he loves you. And believe me when I say that terrifies him far more than it terrifies you. He stalked me, profiled me, manipulated me. Yes, he did all of those things." Bianca's voice was matter-of-fact. "Because that's what he knows. Investigation, strategy, control. My nephew was raised in a world where emotions are weaknesses and trust gets you killed. So when he felt something real for the first time in his adult life, he did what he always does. He tried to control it, to understand it, to make it predictable and safe." "That's not love." "No," Bianca agreed. "But it's the closest thing to love that a man like Lucien knows how to give. The question isn't whether he started wrong. The question is whether you believe he can learn to do better." Elena looked down at her hands. "I don't know if I can trust him." "Trust isn't given, Elena. It's built. One choice at a time, one honest moment at a time." Bianca stood, smoothing her skirt. "But you should know something else. The threat Lucien mentioned, the Calabrese family, it's real, very real. And they've been asking questions about you for the past month. My nephew's protection is the only reason you're still alive. So everyone keeps telling me, because it's true." Bianca moved toward the door, then paused. "Lucien made terrible choices in how he approached you, but he made one good choice too. He fell in love with someone strong enough to call him on his bullshit. Don't waste that strength by running from the only person who can keep you alive." She left Elena alone in the library with books she couldn't focus on and thoughts that wouldn't stop racing. That night, Elena checked her email. Bianca wasn't lying. Lucien had sent her everything: bank accounts, business holdings, detailed breakdowns of his legitimate enterprises, and, this made her stomach clench, equally detailed breakdowns of his criminal operations: money laundering, racketeering, protection rackets, import/export businesses that were fronts for smuggling. He'd sent her a complete map of his entire empire, along with access codes to every account. The email had only one line of text. "You wanted to see my power. Here it is. All of it. Do with it what you will." Elena stared at the screen for 20 minutes. He'd just given her the ability to destroy him. One phone call to the FBI, one anonymous tip, and Lucien Moretti's empire would collapse. She could be free, except the Calabrese family would still be hunting her, except destroying Lucien meant destroying her only protection, except some traitorous part of her didn't want to destroy him at all. Elena slammed the laptop shut and pressed her palms against her eyes. She was in love with him, despite everything, despite the lies and manipulation and psychological profiles. She was in love with the man who'd looked at her tears in a parking lot and decided she was worth saving, even if his methods were fucked up beyond measure. The realization made her want to scream. Instead, she left her room and went looking for Lucien. She found him in his study, surrounded by papers, and looking like he hadn't slept in days. He glanced up when she entered, wariness flickering across his face. "Elena, I got your email." "And?" Elena closed the door behind her and leaned against it. "And I could destroy you, right now. One phone call and everything you've built would burn." "I know. So why did you give me the ammunition?" Lucien set down whatever document he'd been reading and gave her his full attention. "Because you asked to see my power, and the only way to prove I trust you is to put that power in your hands. That's insane. So you keep saying." His mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Are you going to use it?" "I don't know yet." Elena moved into the room, her heart hammering. "I'm still deciding if you're worth the risk." "Fair." They stood in silence for a long moment, tension crackling between them like electricity. Finally, Elena said, "I need you to explain something. When did it change? When did I stop being an investigation and become whatever this is?" Lucien was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "The parking lot. You were sitting there in the rain, bleeding and crying, and you looked up at me with this expression like you couldn't understand why anyone would bother to help, like you'd been trained to expect cruelty instead of kindness. And something in me just broke, because I saw my mother in you, the same quiet suffering, the same determination to handle everything alone. And I knew that if I let you drive away with that flat tire and that broken expression, I would regret it for the rest of my life." Elena's breath caught. "So yes," Lucien continued, "I approached you strategically. I used information from the profile. But everything after that first conversation was real. The books, the manuscript, the way I can't stop thinking about you, the way seeing you smile makes me want to burn down anyone who's ever made you cry. That's not strategy, Elena. That's me losing my mind over you." "You're good with words," Elena said, her voice shaking. "How do I know this isn't just more manipulation?" "You don't." Lucien stood and moved toward her slowly, like approaching a wounded animal. "You can't know for certain. Trust is a gamble, and I'm asking you to gamble on a man who's proven he'll use any advantage to get what he wants. But I'm also promising you that what I want is you, happy, safe, writing again, believing in yourself again. And I will do whatever it takes, including giving you the power to destroy me, to prove that's true." He stopped close enough that Elena could feel the heat radiating off his body. "So here's what I'm offering," he said quietly. "Stay. Write your book. Let me protect you from the Calabrese family. And if after all of that you still want to leave, I'll help you disappear. New identity, new city, enough money to start over. No strings, no manipulation, just freedom." "Why would you do that?" "Because I love you." Lucien's hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing across her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "And loving you means wanting you to be happy, even if that happiness doesn't include me." Elena looked into his dark eyes and saw truth there. Or maybe she just wanted to see truth. Maybe she was still being manipulated and was too far gone to recognize it anymore. Either way, she was tired of fighting, tired of being afraid, tired of pretending she didn't feel the same terrifying, consuming thing he claimed to feel. "If I stay," she said slowly, "things change. No more secrets, no more strategies, no more treating me like a problem to be solved. Done. And you teach me how to protect myself, fighting, shooting, whatever I need to know to survive in your world." Lucien's eyes darkened with something that might have been approval or might have been desire. "I'll teach you everything. And if I write something that exposes parts of your life, our life, you don't get to censor it. As long as it doesn't get you killed, write whatever you want." Elena took a shaky breath. "Okay. Okay? I'm staying. I'm probably going to regret it. I definitely don't trust you yet. But I'm staying." Lucien's expression shifted into something that looked almost like relief. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just don't make me regret this more than I already do. He kissed her then. Slow and deep and full of promises Elena wasn't sure either of them could keep. But for the first time since finding that psychological profile, she kissed him back without reservation. The next 2 weeks fell into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Lucien taught her to shoot. They spent hours in the basement firing range, his body pressed against her back as he corrected her stance, his hands guiding hers until she could hit center mass 3 times out of 5. He taught her basic self-defense, how to break holds, where to strike to cause maximum damage, how to use her size as an advantage instead of a weakness. And at night, they sat in the library and talked about his childhood growing up in a crime family, about her childhood growing up poor with a mother who chose addiction over her daughter, about the terrible things they'd both survived and the people they'd become because of it. Elena started writing again. Real writing, a novel about a woman who falls in love with a monster and has to decide if loving him makes her monstrous too. Lucien read every word and never once asked her to change anything. Things were good, almost perfect, which should have been Elena's first warning that the universe was about to detonate. The explosion came on a Tuesday morning. Elena was in the library working on a particularly difficult chapter when Lucien burst through the door with an expression that made her blood run cold. "We need to move," he said. "Now." "What?" "The Calabrese family knows you're here. They're coming. We have maybe 30 minutes. Elena's laptop slid off her lap as she stood. "How did they find me?" "Does it matter?" Lucien grabbed her arm, already pulling her toward the door. "I have cars waiting. We're going to the secondary location upstate. You'll be safe there." They made it to the foyer before the windows exploded. Glass shattered inward in a spray of glittering fragments. Elena screamed as Lucien threw her to the ground, his body covering hers as gunfire erupted from multiple directions. "Stay down!" he shouted over the chaos. Men in tactical gear poured through the broken windows. Lucien's security team materialized from various parts of the house, returning fire with professional efficiency. The noise was deafening. Elena pressed her hands over her ears, her mind struggling to process what was happening. This was real. People were actually shooting at them. People were going to die. Lucien hauled her to her feet and half-dragged, half-carried her toward the back of the house. Behind them, she heard shouting in Italian. More gunfire. The wet sound of bullets hitting flesh. They burst through a door into the kitchen. Lucien slammed it shut and shoved a massive cabinet in front of it. "There's a tunnel," he said, pulling her toward what looked like a pantry. "It leads to the garage. We can—" The cabinet exploded inward. 3 men in black tactical gear stormed through, weapons raised. Lucien moved with brutal efficiency. He shot the first man center mass before Elena could blink. The second man got off a shot that grazed Lucien's shoulder, making him grunt in pain but not slowing him down. He closed the distance and broke the man's neck with his bare hands. The third man grabbed Elena. She reacted on instinct, exactly like Lucien had taught her, stomped on his instep, drove her elbow into his solar plexus, twisted away when his grip loosened. But he was faster, stronger. His fist connected with her temple, and the world tilted sideways. Elena hit the ground hard, her vision blurring. Through the haze, she saw Lucien roar something incomprehensible. Saw him move toward the man who'd hit her with murder in his eyes. Saw the fourth man she hadn't noticed step out of the shadows and press a gun against Lucien's head. "Don't move," the man said in heavily accented English, "or I paint the walls with your brains." Lucien froze. The man who'd hit Elena dragged her upright, his arm locked around her throat. "Elena Whitmore," the man with the gun said. His voice was cold, professional. "The Calabrese family has questions for you, about Grayson Vale, about money he stole. You're going to answer those questions, and then," he smiled, "well, we'll see if you're still useful after that." "She doesn't know anything," Lucien said, his voice absolutely lethal despite the gun pressed against his skull. "Vale never told her about the money. She's innocent." "No one is innocent, Mr. Moretti." The man's smile widened. "But we'll find out soon enough. Take her." The man holding Elena started dragging her backward. She fought, kicked, screamed. Lucien's eyes met hers across the destroyed kitchen, and she saw something in them that terrified her more than the gun or the men or the blood soaking into expensive tile. Desperation. Raw, absolute desperation. Elena, he said, his voice rough. I love you. Remember that. No matter what happens. I love you. Lucien? The man holding her hit her again. Darkness swallowed everything. Elena woke up in a basement that smelled like mold and old blood. Her head throbbed. Her wrists were zip-tied to a metal chair bolted to the concrete floor. Dim light filtered through a high window, barely illuminating the space. She wasn't alone. 4 men stood around the room. The one who'd spoken in Lucien's kitchen stepped forward, pulling up a chair and sitting backward on it. Good, he said. You're awake. We can begin. I don't know anything, Elena said, her voice hoarse. Grayson never told me about his business. We broke up before the FBI arrested him. Yes, we know. The man pulled out a knife and began cleaning his fingernails with it casually. But you lived with him for 2 years, shared his bed, had access to his computers, his files, his conversations. You expect us to believe he never mentioned where he put our money? He didn't, I swear. The knife flashed. Pain exploded across Elena's cheek as the blade sliced a shallow cut from her ear to her mouth. She screamed. That's for lying, the man said calmly. Next time it'll be deeper. Now, where is our money? I don't know. Tears streamed down Elena's face, mixing with blood. Please, I'm telling the truth. I don't... He hit her. Not with the knife, with his fist, hard enough that her chair tipped backward and her head cracked against concrete. Stars exploded behind Elena's eyes. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard him say, We have time. Lots of time. And you're going to tell us everything before we're finished, one way or another. He raised the knife again. Elena closed her eyes and thought of Lucien, of his hands teaching her to shoot, of his voice saying he loved her, of the promise he'd made to protect her. The basement door exploded inward. Elena's eyes snapped open. Lucien stood in the doorway, backlit by emergency lights, covered in blood that probably wasn't his, holding 2 guns and looking like death incarnate. Get away from her, he said, his voice so cold it could freeze blood. Now! The men in the basement went for their weapons. They didn't stand a chance. Lucien moved like violence personified. He shot 2 men before they'd fully drawn, killed the third with a knife he'd apparently stolen from someone upstairs. And when the man who'd cut Elena tried to grab her as a hostage, Lucien crossed the distance in 3 strides and broke his arm so hard Elena heard the bones snap. The man screamed. Lucien's gun pressed against his forehead. You cut her face, Lucien said quietly, conversationally, like they were discussing the weather. You made her bleed. You made her scream. Give me one reason I shouldn't empty this magazine into your skull. Lucien, Elena whispered. He didn't look away from the man cowering in front of him. What, baby? Don't kill him. Now Lucien looked at her. Blood spattered across his face, eyes wild with rage and fear and relief. He hurt you. I know. But if you kill him, you're proving everyone right. That you're just a monster. That this, she gestured between them, is just violence wearing a prettier mask. I am a monster, Elena. That's not in question. Maybe. But you're my monster. And I'm asking you not to kill him. Lucien stared at her for a long moment. Then he lowered the gun. Instead, he grabbed the man by the throat and slammed him against the wall. You're going to deliver a message to the Calabrese family, Lucien said, his voice soft and absolutely lethal. You're going to tell them that Elena Whitmore is under my protection, that anyone who touches her forfeits their life, that I will burn their organization to the ground and salt the earth where it stood if they ever come near her again. Can you remember that? The man nodded frantically. Lucien released him, and the man fled up the stairs like hell itself was chasing him, which, Elena reflected dimly, it probably was. Lucien holstered his guns and moved to Elena, his hands shaking as he cut through the zip ties. You're hurt, he said, his fingers ghosting over the cut on her face. He hurt you. I should have killed him. I should have... You did exactly what I asked. Elena grabbed his hand and pressed it against her uninjured cheek. You chose me over the violence. That matters. Elena, take me home, she whispered. Please, just take me home. Lucian lifted her out of the chair like she weighed nothing and carried her up the stairs. Through a house full of bodies Elena refused to look at, and into a waiting car. The drive back to the estate took 30 minutes. Elena spent all of them pressed against Lucian's side, his arm locked around her shoulders like he was afraid she'd disappear if he let go. When they finally arrived, Bianca was waiting with a doctor. The cut on Elena's face required stitches, 12 of them, running from her ear almost to her mouth. The doctor said it would scar. Elena looked at herself in the mirror and thought about the woman who'd cried in a grocery store parking lot 6 weeks ago. That woman was gone. In her place was someone harder, someone who'd survived kidnapping and torture and had looked a monster in the eye and asked him to choose mercy. Someone who belonged in Lucien Moretti's violent world, whether she liked it or not. Lucien found her in the bathroom an hour later, still staring at her reflection. "I'm sorry," he said from the doorway. "This is my fault. I should have had better security. Should have anticipated—" "Stop." Elena turned to face him. "This isn't your fault. This is Grayson's fault, and the Calabrese family's fault, and maybe a little bit my fault for being stubborn about accepting your protection sooner, but it's not your fault. You have a scar because of me. I have a scar because bad people exist." Elena moved toward him, reaching up to touch the dried blood still crusting his hairline. "You saved me. Again. That's what I'm choosing to focus on." Lucien's hands came up to frame her face, careful of her injury. "I love you. I know I'm not supposed to say it. I know you don't want to hear it. But I need you to know that when I saw you tied to that chair bleeding," his voice cracked, "I would have burned down the entire world to get you back." "I know?" Elena rose on her toes and kissed him gently. "I know, because I felt the same way when that man had a gun to your head. Because despite everything that's happened, despite all the lies and manipulation and terrible choices, She stopped. Lucian's eyes searched hers. "You what?" Elena took a shaky breath and said the words that would either save her or destroy her completely. "I love you too." The admission hung in the air between them like a blade. Lucien kissed her then, desperately, hungrily, like a man who'd thought he'd lost everything and just discovered he still had one thing worth living for. And Elena kissed him back with equal desperation, because she'd finally accepted the truth. She was in love with a monster, a beautiful, dangerous monster who'd stalked her and profiled her and manipulated her into his world. And somehow, impossibly, that monster had become the only person she trusted to keep her alive. They stumbled toward the bedroom, hands grasping, hearts racing, both of them covered in blood and trauma, and the desperate need to prove they were still alive. Still together, still fighting. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. The Calabrese family would regroup, would plot revenge, would come for them again eventually. But tonight, Elena didn't care. Tonight she had Lucien's hands on her skin and his voice whispering promises against her throat, and the absolute certainty that whatever came next, they would face it together. Monster and the woman who loved him. Predator and prey who'd somehow become partners. In Lucien's world of violence and blood and carefully orchestrated destruction, Elena had finally found the one thing she'd been searching for her entire life. A place where she belonged, even if that place was terrifying. Even if that place was dangerous. Even if that place would probably kill her eventually. She belonged. And that was worth every scar she'd earned to claim it. The war with the Calabrese family lasted 3 weeks. 3 weeks of living like hunted animals, of sleeping in safe houses that changed every 2 days, of Lucien's men dying in dark alleys and quiet rooms while Elena tried to write and pretend her hands weren't shaking every time she heard a car door slam. 3 weeks of watching the man she loved transform into something colder, harder, more dangerous than she'd ever seen. Lucien didn't sleep, barely ate, spent 18-hour days coordinating strikes against Calabrese operations while simultaneously fortifying his own empire against retaliation. Elena watched him hollow out from the inside and didn't know how to stop it. On the 19th day, Lucien came to her with a file folder and an expression that made her stomach clench. "I found him," he said. Elena looked up from her laptop. They were in a penthouse apartment in a building Lucien owned under a shell corporation. 16th floor, bulletproof windows, guards at every entrance. Still didn't feel safe. "Found who?" Marco Calabrese, the head of the family, the man who ordered your kidnapping. Lucian set the folder on the table between them. He's hiding in a compound upstate. 20 men, heavy security, but I have a way in. Elena's mouth went dry. You're going after him. I'm ending this. Lucian's voice was flat, dead. Tonight. Because as long as Marco Calabrese is breathing, you're not safe. And I will not spend the rest of my life watching you flinch every time a door opens. Lucien, this isn't a discussion, Elena. I'm going. The only question is whether you stay here with guards or come with me. Elena stared at him. You want me to come to an assault on a fortified compound? No. I want you safe in a locked room 1,000 miles from here. Lucian's jaw tightened. But I also know you. And I know that if I leave you behind, you'll spend the entire time convinced I'm dead. So I'm giving you the choice. Safe and terrified. Or with me and still terrified, but at least you'll know what's happening. Elena thought about the basement, the zip ties, the knife cutting through her skin. She thought about watching Lucian kill 4 men to save her and the terrible relief she'd felt when the shooting stopped. I'm coming, she said. Elena, I'm coming. She closed her laptop with finality. You don't get to protect me from the consequences of your world anymore. If you're going to war, I'm going with you. Because that's what people do when they love each other. They don't hide. They stand together. Something flickered in Lucien's eyes. Pain, maybe. Or pride. It's going to be ugly, he warned. I know. People are going to die. I know that too. Lucien crossed to her and pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. I don't deserve you. Probably not. Elena's fingers tangled in his shirt. But you've got me anyway. So let's go finish this. The compound was exactly as brutal as Elena had imagined. High walls, guard towers, men with automatic weapons patrolling the perimeter. Lucien's team consisted of 12 men. Professionals, all of them. Former military, former intelligence, the kind of people who killed efficiently and without hesitation. Elena wore a bulletproof vest that felt too heavy and carried a gun Lucien had made her practice with for 2 hours before they left. If anyone gets past us, he'd said, checking her magazine for the 3rd time, you shoot them. Center mass. No warning. No hesitation. Understood? Elena had nodded, her hands shaking. Now she crouched behind an SUV 100 yards from the compound gates, while Lucien coordinated the assault over encrypted radios. The plan was simple. Simultaneous breaches at 3 points. Overwhelming force. Get to Marco Calabrese before he could escape or call for reinforcements. Simple didn't mean easy. 2 minutes, Lucy Tessendé, N said, checking his watch. He looked at Elena with an expression that was part desperation, part determination. Stay in the vehicle. Do not get out unless someone from my team specifically comes for you. If shooting starts and we're not back in 30 minutes, you take this car and drive to the secondary location. There's a phone in the glove box with 1 number programmed. Call it. Follow their instructions. Lucien, he kissed her, hard and fast, and like it might be the last time. I love you, he said against her mouth. Remember that, no matter what happens. Then he was gone, moving toward the compound with his team in a coordinated assault that looked like a ballet of violence. Elena watched through the SUV window, her heart hammering so hard she thought her ribs might crack. The first explosion lit up the night sky. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions, shouting in Italian and English, the wet crack of bullets hitting flesh and concrete and metal. Elena pressed her hands over her ears and tried to breathe. This was insane. She should have stayed at the safe house, should have let Lucien do this without watching, should have... A man in tactical gear appeared at her window. Elena's hand went to her gun automatically. Then she recognized one of Lucien's team. Marco's second in command, a man called Dante who'd been teaching her Italian phrases during their time in hiding. He yanked open the door. We need you inside, now. What? Lucien said, Marco Calabrese won't negotiate with Lucien. He wants to talk to you. Says if you come inside unarmed, he'll end this without more bloodshed. Elena's stomach dropped. That's a trap. Probably. Dante's expression was grim. But Lucien's pinned down on the second floor. We lost 3 men breaching the south wall. And Marco has your ex-boyfriend. Elena's breath stopped. What? Grayson Vale. He's here. Marco's been using him to launder money while he's out on bail awaiting trial, and he's offering a trade. You for Grayson. Both of you walk out alive. The war ends. Lucien would never agree to that. Lucien doesn't know. He's too busy keeping his men alive to listen to negotiations. Dante grabbed her arm. But I know him, and I know that if we lose any more people tonight, he'll never forgive himself. This is the only way to end it without more bodies. Elena looked toward the compound, toward the gunfire and explosions, and the man she loved fighting for his life. Then she looked at Dante. Take me inside. Marco Calabresi's office was surprisingly ordinary. Expensive furniture, dark wood, books on shelves that had probably never been read. And sitting in a chair with his hands zip-tied behind his back was Grayson Vale. He looked terrible, thin, hollow-eyed, like prison and fear and consequences had carved away everything polished about him. His eyes widened when Elena walked in. Elena? What are you? You shouldn't be here. Shut up, Grayson. Marco Calabrese sat behind his desk smoking a cigar. He was older than Elena expected, 60s maybe. Silver hair, cold eyes that had seen too much death to be bothered by the concept. Elena Whitmore, he said, gesturing to a chair. Please, sit. We have much to discuss. Elena remained standing. I'm here. Let Grayson go. In time. Marco took a long drag on his cigar. First, I want you to understand something. This war with Lucien Moretti, it's expensive. I've lost men, money, operations, all because your boyfriend decided you were worth protecting. He's not my boyfriend. He's my fiancé. Marco's eyebrow arched. Interesting. And does your fiancé know that Grayson Vale stole $20 million from me? Money that was supposed to be invested in legitimate businesses but instead disappeared into accounts we can't trace? Elena's blood ran cold. She looked at Grayson. You stole $20 million? I didn't steal it, Grayson said quickly. I invested it. The market turned. I lost it. It was a legitimate business risk. You lost my money gambling on cryptocurrency, Marco interrupted, his voice flat. And then you tried to cover it up by creating fake documents showing returns that didn't exist. That's not investment. That's theft. I was going to pay it back with what? Your trust fund that your father froze when you were arrested? Marco's smile was sharp. You have nothing, Mr. Vale. No money, no prospects, no value whatsoever, except, he looked at Elena, you have information about offshore accounts, about shell corporations, about where the money actually went before it disappeared. Elena's stomach turned. I don't know anything about that. I know, but he does. Marco gestured at Grayson. And he'll tell me. Eventually, with the right motivation. What do you want from me? I want you to convince Lucien Moretti to stop this war, to accept terms. I keep Grayson as insurance. Lucien stops attacking my operations, and everyone goes home alive. He'll never agree to that. Then more people die. Marco stubbed out his cigar. Your choice, Miss Whitmore. End this now, or watch the man you love lose everything trying to protect you. Elena's hands clenched into fists. You want me to trade Grayson's life for peace? I want you to be practical. She looked at Grayson, at the man who'd systematically destroyed her self-worth, who'd humiliated her in grocery stores and told her dreams were for rich people, the man who'd stolen $20 million from the Mafia and let her become collateral damage. Elena, Grayson said, his voice cracking, please, I know I was terrible to you. I know I don't deserve your help, but please, don't let them kill me. Elena thought about the parking lot, the flat tire, the moment Lucien had offered his hand and she'd taken it. Every choice since then had led here, to this room, this decision, this impossible calculation of who deserved to live and who deserved to pay. I'll make you a counteroffer, Elena said, turning back to Marco. I'm listening. Grayson tells you where the money is. All of it. Every account, every transaction, everything you need to recover what he stole. In exchange, you let him go. And you end this war with Lucien, completely. No retaliation, no revenge, it's over. Marco considered this. And what do I get out of forgiving a $20 million theft? You get to keep operating without Lucien Moretti burning your empire to the ground. Elena's voice was steady despite her racing heart. Because I promise you, Marco, if you kill me, if you kill Grayson, if you do anything except accept this deal, Lucian will not stop until every single person in your organization is dead. He will spend every resource he has, call in every favor, destroy every business you own, and he will make sure you watch it all burn before he finally kills you. Silence fell like a weight. Marco studied her with those cold, calculating eyes. You're very certain of his devotion. I'm certain of his capacity for violence when someone he loves is threatened. Elena met his gaze without flinching. So here's the deal. Grayson talks. You get your money back. Everyone goes home alive. Or you refuse, and Lucian Moretti becomes the last mistake you ever make. Marco was quiet for a long moment. Then he laughed. It wasn't a kind sound. You have steel in you, Miss Whitmore. I see why Moretti is obsessed. He stood and moved to a safe built into the wall, pulling out a laptop. Fine. Your ex-boyfriend tells me everything. I verify the information. If it's accurate, you both walk out of here. And I will consider my business with Lucian Moretti concluded. He set the laptop in front of Grayson and cut the zip ties. Start talking, Marco said, and pray you're telling the truth. Grayson's hand shook as he opened the laptop and started typing. For 20 minutes, Elena watched him spill everything. Account numbers, passwords, shell corporations, a complete map of where Marco's money had gone and how to get it back. Marco's men verified each piece of information in real time, making calls, checking accounts, confirming that Grayson wasn't lying. When it was finished, Marco nodded slowly. It appears Mr. Vale is more useful than I thought. The money is recoverable. Then we have a deal, Elena said. We have a deal. Marco pulled out his phone and made a call. He spoke in rapid Italian, then hung up and looked at Elena. I've ordered my men to stand down. The compound doors will open in 5 minutes. You and Mr. Vale will leave, and this war is over. Elena didn't trust him, but she also didn't have a choice. Thank you, she said stiffly. Don't thank me. Just remember that mercy is a debt, Miss Whitmore, and I always collect my debts eventually. Dante appeared in the doorway. Lucien's men are pulling back. We're clear to evacuate. Elena grabbed Grayson's arm and pulled him toward the door. They were halfway across the compound when Lucien appeared, covered in blood and looking like death incarnate. His eyes found Elena and something in his expression cracked. You left the vehicle, he said, his voice dangerous. I told you to stay in the fucking vehicle. I ended the war, Elena said calmly. Marco has his money. Grayson's alive. It's over. Lucian looked past her to where Grayson stood trembling. You traded for him. You negotiated with Marco Calabrese for Grayson Vale's life. Yes. Why? Elena met his eyes. Because you taught me that mercy matters, that choosing not to kill when you have the power to kill is what separates monsters from men. So I chose mercy, even for someone who doesn't deserve it. Lucian stared at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Grayson. You have 10 seconds to get out of my sight before I change your mind about the mercy part. Grayson didn't need to be told twice. He ran. Lucian watched him go, then turned back to Elena. You could have been killed. So could you. That's different. No, it's not. Elena stepped closer, ignoring the blood and gunpowder and the death surrounding them. We're partners, Lucian. That means I don't get to hide while you fight. It means we make decisions together, even the dangerous ones. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing over the scar on her cheek. I thought I lost you. When Dante said you'd gone inside. You didn't lose me. You're not going to lose me. Elena covered his hand with hers. But you need to accept that I'm not a thing to be protected anymore. I'm a person choosing to stand beside you, in all of it, the violence, the danger, everything. Lucien pulled her into his arms and held her like she was the only solid thing in a world gone mad. Around them, his men were loading into vehicles, checking wounds, counting losses, 3 dead, 7 injured, the price of keeping Elena safe. She would remember their faces for the rest of her life. 6 months later, Elena stood in a bookstore in Manhattan holding a hardcover novel with her name on the spine. Monsters and the Women Who Love Them by Elena Whitmore. The dedication page read, For L. You taught me that love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing someone despite their flaws and daring them to do the same. The book was brutal, honest, a fictionalized account of falling in love with a criminal and learning to live in a world where violence was currency and mercy was a luxury few could afford. Critics called it unflinchingly raw and a masterwork of modern noir romance. It became a bestseller in 3 weeks. Lucian stood beside her at the book launch, wearing a tuxedo and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. He hated crowds, hated attention, hated the photographs and interviews and publicity, but he stood there anyway, because Elena had asked him to. "How does it feel, Tia?" he murmured, his hand warm on her lower back. "Seeing your dream come true?" "Terrifying," Elena admitted. "What if people hate it? What if they think I'm glorifying criminal behavior? What if—" "Then they'll be wrong." Lucian's voice was firm. "You wrote the truth. About us. About the choices people make when the world gives them impossible options. That's not glorification. That's honesty." Elena leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath expensive fabric. They'd spent the past 6 months rebuilding. Lucien had quietly divested from several of his more violent operations. Not all of them. He was still a criminal, still dangerous, still someone the FBI watched carefully. But he'd shifted focus toward legitimate businesses, real estate, investments, things that wouldn't get Elena killed by association. He'd also started a foundation, the Isabella Moretti Foundation, named after his mother. It provided college scholarships to young women from low-income families, helped them afford housing, gave them resources to pursue dreams that might otherwise remain fantasies. Elena helped run it. It was the closest thing to redemption either of them would probably get, and it was enough. Across the bookstore, Elena spotted a familiar face. Grayson Vale stood near the fiction section, holding a copy of her book. He looked different, older, worn down by consequences and the reality of a fraud conviction that had cost him everything. Their eyes met across the crowd. Grayson raised the book slightly in acknowledgement, then turned and left without approaching. Some wounds didn't need reopening. Some people were better left in the past. "You okay?" Lucian asked, noticing where she'd been looking. "Yeah." Elena turned back to him. "I'm okay." And she was. For the first time in her entire life, she was genuinely okay. Not perfect, not without scars, not living a life anyone would call conventional or safe. But okay. The book signing lasted 3 hours. Elena's hand cramped from signatures. Her face hurt from smiling. She answered the same questions about her inspiration and her writing process and whether the story was based on real events at least 40 times. She never mentioned that the dedication page wasn't fiction, that the monster in her book was sitting 10 feet away looking bored and dangerous and checking his phone every 5 minutes, that every violent scene was sanitized compared to reality, that the happy ending was still being written, one difficult choice at a time. When it was finally over, Lucien drove them home. Not to the penthouse in the city, not to the estate with its guards and walls. Home, a brownstone in Brooklyn. 3 stories. Renovated but not ostentatious. A library for Elena, an office for Lucien, a life that looked almost normal from the outside. Inside, Elena kicked off her heels and collapsed on the couch with a groan. "Remind me never to do publicity again," she said. "You have a book tour starting next month." "I know. I'm already regretting it." Lucien sat beside her, pulling her feet into his lap and massaging them with practiced efficiency. "You were brilliant tonight. They loved you." "They loved the story. That's different." "Is it?" His hands worked up her calf, finding knots and releasing them with careful pressure. "The story is you, Elena. Your voice, your truth, your refusal to pretend that loving complicated people makes you weak." Elena looked at him. This man who'd stalked her and profiled her and manipulated her into his world, who'd killed for her, destroyed empires for her, given her the resources to finally become who she was meant to be. This beautiful, damaged, dangerous man who'd somehow become home. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. Lucien's hands stilled. "What?" "I'm pregnant." Silence crashed through the room like thunder. Lucien stared at her, his expression cycling through shock, disbelief, fear, and finally something that looked almost like joy. "You're—" His voice cracked. "Are you sure?" Took 3 tests this morning, all positive. Elena's hand moved to her stomach. I know we didn't plan this. I know it's complicated. I know bringing a child into your world is... Lucian's kiss cut off the rest of her words. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet. I'm going to be a father, he whispered. Terrifying, right? Absolutely terrifying. His hand covered hers on her stomach. But also, perfect. You're perfect. This is perfect. Nothing about us is perfect, Lucian. No. He smiled, and it was real and vulnerable and everything she'd never expected from him. But it's ours, and that's better than perfect. 2 years later, Elena sat in the same library where she'd first started writing again, watching her daughter sleep in a bassinet beside her desk. Isabella Grace Moretti, Bella for short. She had Lucien's dark hair and Elena's eyes, and a personality that was already far too stubborn for someone who could barely hold her own head up. Elena loved her with a fierceness that terrified her. Lucien had transformed the moment Bella was born. The dangerous criminal became a man who woke up for 2 a.m. feedings and changed diapers without complaint, and sang Italian lullabies in a voice that was surprisingly gentle. He'd also become even more protective. The brownstone now had security that would make a military installation jealous. Guards rotated shifts outside. Cameras covered every angle. No one got within 50 feet of Isabella Moretti without being thoroughly vetted. Elena had stopped fighting it, because she understood now. Love made you vulnerable, made you willing to burn down the world to protect the people who mattered, and nothing mattered more than the tiny human sleeping 3 feet away. Her second novel was due to her publisher in 6 weeks. This one was softer, about motherhood and redemption and learning to build something good from broken pieces. She thought it might be her best work yet. Bella stirred in her sleep, making small noises. Elena stood and lifted her daughter from the bassinet, settling into the rocking chair by the window. Outside, Brooklyn moved through its evening rhythm. Cars passing, people walking dogs. Normal life happening all around them. Inside, Elena rocked her daughter and thought about the woman she used to be. The one who counted coins in grocery stores and believed her dreams were fantasies. The one who let men like Grayson Vale convince her she was worthless. The one who cried in parking lots and couldn't imagine a future beyond survival. That woman was gone, replaced by someone harder, scarred, complicated, someone who'd looked at darkness and chosen to find light anyway. Someone who'd fallen in love with a monster and taught him how to be a man. Lucien appeared in the doorway, still wearing his suit from whatever meeting he'd attended. His eyes found Elena and Bella, and his entire expression softened. How are my girls? He asked quietly. We're good. Bella was fussy earlier, but she's settling now. He crossed the room and kissed Elena's forehead, then his daughter's. I have news. Good or bad? Depends on your perspective. Lucien pulled up a chair beside them. Marco Calabrese died this morning. Heart attack. Natural causes, according to the autopsy. Elena looked at him carefully. Natural causes? Completely natural. Lucien's expression was unreadable. His empire is fragmenting. There will be a power vacuum, probably violence. But none of it will touch us. I made sure of that years ago. How? By building alliances. Making strategic investments. Ensuring that anyone who took over the Calabrese operations would owe me favors. He stroked Bella's hair with gentle fingers. I told you I'd protect our family. This is part of that. Elena should have been horrified. Should have questioned whether Marco's death was actually natural. Should have demanded promises that Lucien was leaving that world behind completely. But she didn't. Because she understood the currency of the world they lived in. Understood that protection came in forms that weren't always clean or legal or easy to justify. Understood that loving Lucien meant accepting all of him. The violence and the calculated cruelty and the ruthless efficiency with which he eliminated threats. Thank you, she said quietly, for keeping us safe. Always. Lucien's hand covered hers. For the rest of my life. You and Bella. Nothing else matters. They sat in silence for a long moment, the three of them tangled together in the fading light. Then Bella woke up and started crying, and the moment shattered into the chaos of diaper changes and bottle preparation and all the mundane realities of parenthood. But later, after Bella was fed and changed and sleeping again, Elena found Lucien in their bedroom standing at the window looking out at the city. What are you thinking about? She asked, wrapping her arms around him from behind. Everything. Nothing. He turned in her embrace, his hand settling on her waist. Mostly I'm thinking about how a year ago I never could have imagined this. A family. A home. Something worth protecting that isn't built on fear. Do you miss it? The old life? Sometimes. The simplicity of it. Knowing exactly who you were and what you were capable of. Lucien's thumb traced the scar on her cheek. But then I look at you and Bella and I realize I don't miss it at all. Because this, us, is infinitely more complicated and infinitely more valuable. Elena rose on her toes and kissed him. Slow, deep, full of promises and history and the weight of everything they'd survived to get here. I love you, she said against his mouth. Monster and all. I love you too. Lucian pulled her closer. My salvation, my damnation, my everything. They made love slowly, quietly, careful not to wake the baby sleeping in the next room. And afterward, tangled together in sheets that cost more than Elena used to make in a month, she thought about the journey that had brought them here. A parking lot, a flat tire, a hand extended through a car window, one choice that had seemed impossible in the moment, one choice that had changed everything. She would never know who she might have become if she'd refused Lucien's help that night. If she'd called a tow truck and gone home to her tiny apartment and continued surviving instead of living. But she knew who she was now. A writer. A mother. A woman who'd learned that strength wasn't about never breaking. It was about what you built from the pieces. A woman who'd fallen in love with danger and found home in the arms of someone who'd kill for her without hesitation. The scar on her face ached sometimes, a reminder of violence and choices and the price of protection. She wore it without shame, because scars told stories, and hers told a story of survival and transformation and refusing to let trauma define her. 5 years after that night in the parking lot, Elena Whitmore stood at a podium accepting a literary award for her third novel. The auditorium was full of people who knew her story. The barista who became a best-selling author. The woman who married a reformed criminal and somehow made it work. Reformed was a generous term. Lucien still ran businesses that operated in gray areas, still had connections to people who solved problems with violence, still had that dangerous edge that made smart people nervous. But he'd also funded literacy programs in underserved communities, bankrolled domestic violence shelters, created opportunities for people who'd been written off by a society that didn't care about second chances. He sat in the front row wearing a tuxedo and looking vaguely uncomfortable, Bella on his lap in a dress that matched Elena's gown. Their daughter was 4 now, sharp, observant, already showing signs of her father's strategic mind and her mother's creative soul. Elena looked at them and felt her throat tighten. This was her family. Imperfect, complicated, built on choices that would horrify some people and inspire others. But hers. She gave her acceptance speech without notes, talked about the importance of telling difficult stories, about refusing to sanitize reality for comfort, about how the most powerful narratives came from people willing to expose their scars. When she finished, the applause was thunderous, but the only reaction that mattered was Lucien's. He was crying. Not obviously. Just a slight wetness at the corners of his eyes that most people wouldn't notice. But Elena noticed. After the ceremony, they went to dinner at a restaurant that required reservations months in advance. Bella charmed the waitstaff with her ridiculous vocabulary and polite manners that were definitely not genetic. She's going to be trouble when she's older, Elena said, watching their daughter carefully arrange her napkin. She's trouble now. Lucien smiled. But she's our trouble. Did you ever imagine this? Back when we met? That we'd be here? Honestly? No. Lucien reached across the table and took Elena's hand. I imagined keeping you safe. Maybe convincing you to stay despite my history. But this, a family, a life that feels almost normal. I didn't think I deserved it enough to imagine it. And now? Now I wake up every morning terrified I'll somehow destroy it. His grip tightened. That my past will catch up with us. That I'll make a wrong choice and lose everything that matters. Elena squeezed back. You won't, because you're not doing this alone. We're partners, remember? In all of it. Bella looked up from her menu. Daddy, what's lobster? Lucien launched into an explanation that was far too detailed for a 4-year-old, but perfectly suited to Bella's endless curiosity. Elena watched them and felt a peace she'd never expected to find. This was enough. Not perfect, not without complications, but enough. Later that night, after Bella was asleep and the house was quiet, Elena and Lucien stood in the library looking at the wall of published novels with her name on the spine. 4 books now, each one a bestseller, each one a piece of her soul transformed into art. "I'm proud of you," Lucien said quietly. "Not just for the writing, for everything. For surviving what we went through, for building this life despite every reason not to trust it. I couldn't have done it without you." "You could have. But I'm glad you didn't have to." Elena turned to face him, this man who'd been her nightmare and salvation in equal measure. "Do you have any regrets?" she asked. "About how we started? About the investigation and the manipulation and all of it?" Lucien considered this carefully. "I regret the pain I caused you, the lies, the betrayal of trust. I regret that you can never fully know if I would have loved you without the profile telling me how to approach you." "That's not an answer. It's the only honest answer I have." He cupped her face gently. "But I don't regret where we ended up. I don't regret fighting for you, and I will never regret the life we've built together, even if the foundation was cracked from the start." Elena looked into his eyes and saw truth there. Complicated, difficult truth, but truth nonetheless. "I don't regret it either," she said. "I probably should, but I don't." "Why not?" "Because you taught me something important, that we don't get to choose how our stories begin. We only get to choose what we do with them. And I chose to take something broken and make it beautiful." Lucien kissed her then, soft and reverent and full of gratitude, and Elena kissed him back, tasting redemption and compromise and the bittersweet knowledge that love was never simple when you built it from wreckage. But it was theirs, and that made it worth every scar, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt and fear and desperate hope that somehow they could make this work. Years later, many years later, Elena would tell their daughter the story of how she and Lucien met. Not the sanitized version, not the fairy tale, the truth. About a parking lot and a flat tire and a dangerous man who offered help when he shouldn't have. About psychological profiles and manipulation and falling in love despite every rational reason not to. About choosing to stay when leaving would have been safer. About building a life from impossible choices and learning that family wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up, fighting, choosing each other even when it was hard. Bella would listen with her mother's intensity and her father's calculating mind, processing every detail. And when Elena finished, Bella would ask the same question Elena had once asked herself. Was it worth it? Elena would look at her daughter, brilliant, fierce, loved beyond measure, and she would answer with complete honesty. Every scar, every sleepless night, every moment of fear, all of it, because it gave me you. It gave me a life I never could have imagined. It taught me that sometimes the scariest choices lead to the most extraordinary destinations. Then she would tell Bella something else, something important. But you don't have to make the same choices I did. You don't have to love dangerous men or build your happiness from broken pieces. You get to choose differently, to learn from my mistakes, to be smarter and safer and more careful. Bella would nod, would promise to make better choices. And Elena would know, with the certainty that comes from having been young and stubborn and convinced she knew better, that her daughter would make her own mistakes anyway. That was the nature of being human. You survived your own story. You built what you could from what you were given. And you hoped the people you loved would be luckier, smarter, stronger. But you couldn't protect them from their own journeys. You could only love them through it, the way Lucien had loved Elena through hers. Flawed, complicated, absolutely imperfect, but real. And in the end, that was the only thing that mattered. The rain had stopped falling on the city the night Elena Whitmore's life changed forever. But sometimes, when she stood at the window of their brownstone watching storms roll in, she remembered that parking lot, that flat tire, that moment when a stranger extended his hand and she took it. One choice, one impossible, terrifying, world-shattering choice. And from it, she built everything. A career, a family, a life worth living. She built herself. Not the woman Grayson had tried to convince her she was. Not the broken barista counting coins in grocery stores. But someone new. Someone forged in fire and blood, and the desperate determination to deserve the second chance she'd been given. Lucien appeared behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he murmured. "Everything. Nothing. Mostly how lucky I am." "Lucky," he laughed softly. "Elena, you were kidnapped, tortured, and forced to live in a world most people would call a nightmare. That's not luck, isn't it?" She turned in his arms, looking up at the man who destroyed her life and rebuilt it into something better. "Because I look at what we have, Deech. Bella, the books, this home, us, and I can't imagine a version of my life that's better than this. Even with the scars, even with the trauma, even with everything we've survived." Lucien's expression softened into something that was pure love. "Then I'm the lucky one. Because I found you, against all odds, against all logic, against every reason the universe should have kept us apart. I found you." "We found each other," Elena corrected, "and we chose each other. Every day. Despite everything." "Despite everything," Lucien agreed. They stood there as the window, rain starting to fall against the glass, wrapped in each other and the life they'd built from impossible choices and desperate hope. And Elena thought about the woman she used to be, the one who believed dreams were for rich people, who let others define her worth, who settled for survival instead of demanding more. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone who'd learned the hardest lesson life could teach, that you couldn't always choose what happened to you, but you could choose what you became because of it. Elena Whitmore had chosen to become extraordinary, not despite the darkness, but because of it. Because she'd looked into the eyes of a monster and seen something worth saving, and in saving him, she'd saved herself. That was her story. Imperfect, brutal, absolutely true, and she would spend the rest of her life telling it in every way she knew how. Through books, through raising Bella, through building a foundation that gave other women the same second chances she'd been given, through loving Lucien with the fierce, complicated devotion of someone who understood that real love wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing someone despite their flaws, trusting them to do the same, and building something beautiful from the wreckage you'd both survived. Outside, thunder rumbled across the city. Inside, Elena and Lucien held each other and listened to their daughter's soft breathing from the monitor on the table. And somewhere in the distance, in a parking lot that looked like 1,000 other parking lots, another woman was probably crying beside a broken-down car. Elena hoped someone would stop to help her, but she also hoped that woman would be smart enough to run if the help came with dark eyes and dangerous promises. Because not everyone got to survive the choices Elena had made. Not everyone built happiness from manipulation and violence and love that started in the worst possible way. Elena had been extraordinarily lucky, or maybe just extraordinarily stubborn. Either way, she was here, alive, thriving, and that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.